Hey folks, it's Prescott. Thanks for tuning into the video and visiting the site. So I'm recreating my talk from Phoenix Design Week 2024. You can see I got the t-shirt, I got my name badge here. So doing my best to recreate the experience because so many people had to miss it this year. And I got the feedback that they wanted to see it. So I'm recording it just here at my desk. So you can watch it, of course, after the fact. So I really appreciate it. Be sure to check out the links below for all the resources that I mentioned. And then, of course, get in touch. The emails and everything else are right there as well. Okay, let's jump into it. Okay, folks, here we go. So you think you know InDesign. Once again, let me just quickly introduce myself. I am Prescott Perez-Fox. And regarding the subject of InDesign, you should know, I am a certified professional in InDesign. That's an Adobe Certified Professional. I'm also a community expert, and that's a pretty recent development, but I'm enjoying taking part on the Adobe side of things. And then I am a creative educator as well, and that really that sort of ties back to when I was working full-time teaching design, including a class on InDesign. And so, those two things will come back in just a second, but let's keep moving. We're just gonna let it flow, all right? First, let's stop in 1999, and that's me in the center there in the blue shirt, dressed like Mark Zuckerberg. And this was our yearbook staff at the time. It's a bit of a low-res image, so that's us. You can see in the background, like, it's actually in the photo studio at our high school, and we didn't fit. So group photos are not meant for that, that width of a backdrop. But this is the fun stuff that we were doing back in '99. And that's also the year that InDesign was born. And that's 25 years ago. And recently, they just actually sort of announced or celebrated the 25th anniversary of InDesign. And if you go back and watch the launch video from that time, it's very lo-fi, I admit. But you get to see that some of what was created in InDesign way back then is still with us. So on the one hand, the product has not really evolved. It's still page layout. It's still 2D design. It's still great for handling typography. But on the other hand, that was 25 years ago, and there's been so much complexity since then. But it's also funny that, the journey has sort of taught us something. So let's go through it. For me personally, I was in Philadelphia for 5 years in college, and then I went to England in graduate school, and then spent most of my career in New York at 13 years, and 10 of those years were as a freelancer, and then 5 years teaching, like I mentioned, out here in Arizona. So between those last two, especially, I sort of feel like this.
I'm super excited. It was really tough. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Right. It was fun, got a little beat up, but I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. The realization, of course, you win some, you lose some. That's fine. But here's the funny thing about working, especially as a freelancer in New York for all that time, and also seeing the students and their instincts, is like there's always something new to learn. And every time you're into a new space, you can find something new to grab onto. So just remember that we are here to improve in this talk, in this conversation, not to become perfect. So I don't know who's the king of InDesign. It's not me, but we're improving, right? So this goes back to really what we're doing here. Over 25 years, I have seen that many designers never really learned InDesign properly or fully. There's a lot of bad habits in design studios and even in professional organizations, design first organizations, ad agencies, you name it. There's some bad habits. There's a lot of corners getting cut, a lot of rushing, and people don't really know the best practices. From the student side, I see instinct. So I see when someone comes from Illustrator and they intuitively do blank, that comes into InDesign. So this talk is really to clarify some of the stuff that we should have learned, as well as the things that are sort of hidden in plain sight, underrated workflows, things that it's okay. You think you know InDesign? You don't. I'm going to show you some new stuff, some better stuff. We are here to improve. So that's just something to remember. I said that in a very goofy way, I admit. Okay, hidden in plain sight. Yeah, buried utilities. There's a lot in InDesign, I admit, that is like overwhelming just to look at. So that's one of the biggest things when people come to it for the first time. They're like, holy crap, I have to have 50 windows open, all the palettes on the right. Like, it's overwhelming. But some of the stuff is just below the surface, is really helpful. So we're going to dive into that. And then I'm going to leave you with some pro tips and best practices. All right. So there's plenty there to sort of latch onto and remember and try to emulate as you go forward. So just remember, we're here to improve. All right. Let's have some fun with it. Have you heard this quote? Hell is other people. Jean-Paul Sartre. This is from the 1940s, from a play, but the phrase itself has sort of had a life of its own since then. And so we could do a little spin-off here for the creative professionals and say, designer hell is other people's files, right? Have you ever had to open someone from your organization, maybe a client, maybe another agency? Yikes. You just think, who set this up? What is happening? I can't make sense of this. No wonder this organization is failing. Whatever the thought is, let's try and fix this. Let's try and reduce the hell, banish the hell files, and build what I call super files. Okay, super, you see it's in uppercase because it's actually an acronym. And you're probably not going to guess what it stands for, so I'll just tell you. This actually stands for speed, updating, partnering, error suppression, and repeatability. So once we start to master the super file, once we start to adopt the best practices and make full use of the tool, we will get speed. We will get fast ability to update. We will get a seamless transition between partnering. We will get error suppression. Man, that's a good one. And we will get that repeatability, which is not the same as speed, but it's related, of course. So once we master all the supers, we'll be a superhero. So that's 2024. That's where we're taking you. This is what we want to be, the InDesign superheroes, right? And that, of course, is what Adobe generates when you type in InDesign superhero. So, all right, let's jump into it from there. I'm going to show the structure of the talk here is 9 realities about InDesign. And there are sort of many more, but I want to talk about these 9, these observations, these realities, these vectors of approach that we can talk about how to improve, remember? So let's jump in. Number 1, InDesign relies on old printing terminology. Yes, it absolutely does. So if you're using InDesign, chances are you're sort of coming from the great school of 2D design, of communication, of writing, of publishing, right? We have the examples through history. We have the Roman stonecutters making signage on buildings. We have the medieval scribes, the monks doing illuminated manuscripts and doing calligraphy, right? And this beautiful sort of black letter calligraphy. And I totally want to make that into a font. That's another story. And then we see like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment age, the era of communication, the printing press, the rise of literacy, the rise of media in the form of newspapers and pamphlets and all this other stuff. And that, of course, ties directly into what we're doing today with InDesign. And we're using some of this hundreds-year-old terminology, right? Here's some terminology that is actually in InDesign. It's printing terminology. It's old school. It's very esoteric, right? Who knows what the finance department thinks when you're talking about, oh, I gotta bleed the spine and justify the bullet spread. Like it almost sounds like beat poetry of a kind here. And these are terms that are actually in InDesign. The software mimics the profession and uses the phrasing here, but there's actually a few others that aren't in InDesign, and they're sort of important. So I just list a few here. These are ones always come up in conversation. Widows and orphans, hanging, trim, safety, like the page size. Actually, InDesign doesn't call it trim. It just calls it the page size. Safety is synonymous with margins, but if you're talking to printers, they're probably going to use safety. And even the idea of flowing a document or adding the text is not called flow in InDesign. I guess it's called place and thread, but it's a whole different thing. So just be mindful when you're using industry terminology and shorthand versus the actual software terminology and the sort of proper function names, right? It's not in there. I didn't put it on the screen here, but if you work in print long enough, you realize people don't actually say cyan, yellow, magenta, and black. They say blue, yellow, red, and black. And so you're like, wait, blue? Is it blue or is it red? Is it cyan? You get to know it in context, but let's keep going. Oh, by the way, just to drill it into your brain for the 500th time, the bleed, the trim, and the safety, aka the margins. Everyone should know this. Like, stop whatever you're doing and do a little crash course on this. The bleed is the total printing. The trim is what actually gets cut out, and that's the part you keep. That's the final size. And then the safety is where you don't want any important items visually to be landing too close to the page edge. That's the thumb space on the outer margins. That's the gutter on the inside spine of a book where it sort of folds in and sometimes gets crushed. And it's just visually odd to have things too close to the edge, even if they don't, mechanically get cut off, right? You should know that. Of course you know that. Okay, let's keep going. This is still number one. We're talking about printing terminology. A best practice within that is to use the quick apply in InDesign to find obscure terms. So let me actually pop over to InDesign. I have files open. And quick apply, if you've never used it, is this little lightning bolt thing in the upper right corner. And you can hover over it. It says quick apply. And you can also hit Command Return. And that's how I prefer to use it. Command Return on a Mac. I think it's Control Return on Windows. And it brings up the quick apply. Bring it up. And when you're done with it, you can just hit Escape. There you go. This is really cool because it lets you find obscure typographic and obscure terminology that you know is somewhere in InDesign, but you're not exactly sure. So in this example file, I'm going to actually like sort of make a little style here where I want as it, and then I want everything else to sort of flow in a vertical line. So I know that that's the indent to here feature. Have you used that? You should, but you're like, I don't remember where the command is. So that's okay because you have quick apply. So if you put your cursor in there, because this is a type function, so you have to actually be in the type, and you hit Command Enter, and the thing comes up. I actually just did it, indent to here. You see that it's like a live search window, and then you can click it, and boom, it'll put the character in place, and then that sort of does what you want it to. Here's another example. If you're somewhere in the text, encouragement. That's a long word. Okay, so let's say you wanted to put a discretionary hyphen in encouragement, but you want it to be after incur, like not rather than meant. So I can use the quick apply to bring this up. I can search for a discretionary hyphen and then enter it there. And now you can see that the file like re-breaks a little bit. So that's my discretionary hyphen rather than the sort of automatic hyphen, I guess you could say. So that's another way to use the quick apply. Let's jump back and keep going here. A pro tip is building the slug with the terminology. So again, that printing terminology. Let's go take a look at a document that has a slug. So I know I built one here because this is the program for Phoenix Design Week. And so what did I do? I put all this information on the side. That's a slug. But I also put it specifically in this area that talks about, you know what? Let me hide all that stuff. That I put the bleed, the trim, and the safety, and I call it out right here on the page. So if someone opens this file, that should have an asterisk. They should be able to see the bleed, the trim, and safety. So I'm using printing terminology because this is sort of a very printerly thing to do, is to build that slug. We'll come back to these in a second. There's more to come with the slugs. So let's go back to the PDF here and just keep rolling. This is another example of a slug where you can see on the right side, not only do I have the information about the project and the contact info and stuff, but then I also have these technical inks, the score, the perforation, and the dye. That file I think is open actually. I'll let me see if I can bring it up. Yeah, here we go. So you can see I made the flat bleed, flat trim. So this is a folded carton mailer, and when it's flat, it sort of matters because that determines the size of the press that you're gonna have to use. This is so old, look at that. But same type of thing, like you're using the colors, you're using the typefaces, you're bringing everything into the document itself. So that's a pro tip. Okay, reality number 2. No one explains the type hierarchy. Okay, this is very basic in InDesign. You use it all the time, but no one really explains it. So let's jump in and clarify. The type hierarchy is how the type works and the relationships between different type elements. This will make sense in just a second. So let's start with the paragraph. And the paragraph is basically like the molecule, or sort of, yeah, I guess it is the molecule of InDesign. If you're talking about molecular design, everything in InDesign references, all the text, I should say, references a paragraph. You cannot have text in InDesign that is not part of a paragraph somewhere. And you're going to have multiple paragraphs, but every piece of text, even if it's a single character, it's just one letter, it's going to be a paragraph. That also comes into paragraph styles. We'll talk about that in a second. But any paragraph that you create, any amount of text, is going to be held in a text frame. So similarly, in InDesign, you cannot put text outside of a text frame. Now, you can do weird things with margins that they sort of float outside, and it's like anchored, but the text itself is going to be associated with some text frame somewhere. That's different than a lot of other software where you don't really need to put a frame. You can just attach like a floating nugget of text and it just lives on its own. That's okay. But InDesign, every text frame has paragraphs within it. And then every text frame, or yeah, every text frame is part of a story. Every paragraph is part of a story. So the reason the story is the highest one, it kind of governs everything, is that you can have a single story that flows through multiple text frames. And then, of course, that story is lengthy and it has itself multiple paragraphs. So let's take a look. Here's a screenshot where you can see that this is like a 2-page spread of a document. And the story actually comes from somewhere else. And it flows into this main text frame, jumps to the next page, flows down into the next one, and it just keeps going. And I believe I have this file open as well. Let's go there. So I will go down, and you can see if I turn on, I'll use the quick apply, show text threads, boom. Now you like that. Now you can see it starts on the front page, then it goes to this paragraph or this text frame, keeps going. All the text frames are threaded together. And so that's a long story with lots of paragraphs flowing together. Let's go the other way. Let's go into the paragraph. So within a paragraph, we have characters. And same thing. Every paragraph has characters, even if it's just like one letter or something, that's a character. There are actually 3 types of characters in InDesign. And they are, you probably guessed, glyphs, white space, and hidden characters. So a glyph is anything made of ink, essentially. All the punctuation, all the numbers, all the letters, all the accents, even like bullets and sort of symbols that are thrown into a font. That's all glyphs. White space, which is basically spaces, but the different widths of spaces, those are all there. And then the hidden characters, which are mainly like software characters, I guess you could say. So a discretionary hyphen is one of them. It only appears when it has an occasion to appear. A return character is a hidden character. It doesn't get printed, but it's in the actual paragraph and you can select it. That's important. So here's the glyphs panel, which a lot of people don't actually know that this exists. It's right there in InDesign. You can just go to Window Glyphs and open it up, and it has all the glyphs, all the characters from that particular font, or you can search for like other fonts on your computer. It's very handy, especially if, like, for example, in that screenshot, you can see on the top row, I have that X. Actually, there's 2 X's. One is the brand X, the formerly known as Twitter nonsense, but the other one is like, you see it next to the 2 and the 3. That's actually not the X. That's the multiplication symbol. That's the like dimensionally like by, and that's a glyph character, but you don't get it just from typing the letter X. You actually have to go find it in the glyphs panel. Very helpful for that sort of thing. Okay, and then let alone if you're writing in Serbo-Croatian or whatever accent language is coming up here. All right, let's keep going. A best practice regarding the type hierarchy is to use the story editor. And the story editor is one of those functions that has been in InDesign for many versions, but very few people know it's there. So let's demonstrate it. Essentially, if you touch a piece of text and maybe highlight something like that, you can go to Edit in Story Editor, which I didn't magically put it there. It's there. And then you can select that. And then this craziness comes up. This like IBM Selectric, like very lo-fi version of it, almost like a text editor, like a plain text document. And you could see, okay, that's the part I have highlighted. It's in green. That's just on my computer, by the way. And you could say, oh, my tablet just went out. I'll get the mouse here. It shows you not only what you have selected, but then it also shows you what style it is. So you could say, all right, this is body text. That's great. And then this is actually written in line. And it even shows me the spelling errors. Conveniency. Maybe that should be convenience. There we go. So this is actually a text from 1776. So they spell things differently. But you can correct text in here. But importantly, you can also see where things are. Like here's a return character. And there's another return character there. But if you had like a random return character in the middle of a word, you'd be like, whoa, what's going on here? You might want to fix a spacing error, and you can actually delete that. If I scroll up, you can see that these are actually bullet items. So according to InDesign, they're actually paragraphs, even though they are bullet items, so they don't even have proper punctuation or anything. And then I can save this and just close the story editor, and it takes me back to the document, and the changes will be made. There's a cool thing about the story editor. Let's see if I put it there. No. If I go to edit, I gotta have something selected. Edit with story editor. I can actually configure the way the story editor looks. If you go to the preferences, it's way down at the bottom somewhere. Where is it? Story editor display. Again, so many people overlook that because you're just not looking for it. And you have a long list of colors. So instead of cornstarch, you can have wheat. Don't ask me where they come from. And then instead of text color being gunmetal, you can have it as like, maybe, is there a really dark brown? Mocha? Like a low contrast thing. Okay. And then hit OK. And then you can see it just changes a little bit. You can change the typeface as well. I don't know if you caught that. Let me go back. Story editor display. Mono condensed. So what if I want, like, instead of the input, I want input serif condensed. And 21 point is too small. Let's go to like 26 point. And that's okay. And then boom, the whole thing changes. So configure it the way you're comfortable if you have a big screen or something. But this is really helpful. And the other thing that's helpful, let's go to the front page here. So I'm looking for where I put that discretionary hyphen. You remember that? Maybe it's not. Yeah, there it is. Can you see it? In encouragement, there's like a hidden weird character there. And you can actually copy and paste that. So if I go to that character, hit shift, and then tap left, you'll see I'm highlighting. Can you see that? That's crazy. Let me change. Let me change the color of this thing. It's like really green. It's hard to see. It's so small, but once I have it highlighted, you can actually copy that, and then you can drop it anywhere. Employment, and you can see I pasted improvement. I can paste a hidden character. It's barely showing up. You got to trust me on this one. Hidden characters are like punctuation and like, they're like glyphs and they're like white space. You can copy and paste them. So that's your pro tip for this situation here. All right, let's jump back in and we keep moving. Reality number 3, paragraph styles aren't just style. They're structure too. This is a big one here, and it sort of goes back to the definition of paragraph and character styles, which frankly, I think a lot of people have to review, because I have seen, maybe you have seen, people that have done entire documents, entire 100-page documents, maybe even a book with just character styles, and it's scary how they pulled it off. Let's jump in. Going back to this layering situation, this onion, the characters are within the paragraph. Just remember that for a second here. Let's dive in. Here's the definition, right? All of us who went to 3rd grade know that a paragraph is a series of sentences, hopefully on a related topic. And you can see whenever there's a period, that's sort of the end of the sentence, end of the paragraph, right? We see this, we understand this. That's the regular definition of paragraph. But in InDesign, it's a little bit different because we can see something like this and say, well, that doesn't really look like a paragraph in the traditional sense, but actually those are all paragraphs in InDesign. And so anything that has its own structure and its own end of paragraph character is itself a character or a paragraph, right? So paragraph styles are not just style. When to use each? Let's just clarify it. Paragraph is for entire sections of text, including spacing, alignment, and structure. So if you need the layout and the look, use the paragraph, and that's similar to display block in CSS. It's also similar to div and to obviously paragraph and to most of the headlines, actually. Most things in HTML are like a paragraph. The character, on the other hand, is what you use if it's individual characters and words. If you need to select specific pieces, use character, and that's similar to inline. So yes, if you're doing inline styling in HTML, you're thinking along the lines of like a character styling. And so here's a sort of call out, right? Everything is a paragraph. The headlines, the text, and then there's another gap, and then some more text. That's all paragraphs. And those, actually, this is set up within one text frame, but that's a whole other story. The characters are the small things. So you can have a different look for that italicized and. You can actually have a different look for any punctuation or any ampersands like that. And you can have a different look for selected piece of text like that. A kind of custom highlight that changes its font as well. That's a paragraph style. There are several styles in InDesign, and this is kind of how they're related, where the object style is the broadest one, and it contains the paragraph styles, and then the paragraph style contains the character style. For this talk, and as long as you can possibly manage it, I recommend skipping tables and cells. Tables and cells are just a mess in InDesign, and even the pros will sort of help you avoid them. So just forget it for now. But here's the cool thing to remember: the the character features are in the paragraph styles. And so you can see what I have highlighted here is like, what is that? 5, 6, 8 different things, 7 that those are character controls that you can configure along with the paragraph or the spacing and structure controls. So that's how you can tell that this one supersedes the other one. You have the same and more. So that's where you should use all of that. Okay, here's a best practice. Use the based on and next options. Oh, I don't have a screenshot. Let me show it to you. So if you have a document open, let's go to this one. Here we go. I'm just gonna open up. Make sure I have nothing selected, and I will just go to like first line indent. So you can see that it has a based on. So this is body text, no first line indent. So it's based on body text. And the only thing that's changing is the spacing. So you can see the left indent and the first line indent are set to 0. Oh, that's cool. So it's essentially the same as body text. And when I update the body text, this one will change as well, because the only thing different is that first line, right? The next styling is almost easier to understand by seeing it. So right now I have that big chapter title, then I have the chapter name, then I have this little flourish, then I have this uppercase intro paragraph, then I have the paragraph with the drop cap, and then it just goes into some other stuff. So you can actually style that with a single click. So first, let me demonstrate it. I will unstyle this by just going to basic. There you go. So it strips out all the styling. And if I select all this, I can then right click and on the chapter number, and I can say chapter number, then next style. So it knows when you reach the end of the paragraph, that's going to change style. Then you go to the next, and when you reach the end of this one, you're going to change again. You're going to go to the next. That's weird that it kept the font here. Oh, this is Minion. Okay. You see, so anytime we have a paragraph, we're gonna change styles. So let's do that, and then chapter number, then next style, and boom, everything's done with a single click. You see that? So it got all the order, and then this one, you could just change it to the one with the drop cap. That's it. Easy. So this is also cool because if you're typing just randomly, so for example, if this paragraph like didn't exist and I was just chapter 3, and then I pasted it in, I say, oh, geez, that's not what I want. I could just like hit enter and then start typing, and it'll automatically shift the styling. So it knows that this is first, this is second, and this is third. So that's the power of a next style. This might be really helpful if you have like a bulleted list. You could say, what's the header of the list? And then hit enter, it'll immediately go, and the next one will be a bullet, right? So you could type in it. But of course, most people like to type outside of InDesign. It's just there to be helpful. So based on the next, and let me show you again where that is. If you double click, or if you open the paragraph styling options, it's right here on the front page. So general, it's right at the top. How many of you just skip that and you go right to the details? It's based on and next are extremely powerful. You can actually put a shortcut too, although I have to admit I don't use shortcuts that frequently. Ugh. Let's go back. Let's see, pro tip, keep a bold and italic character style. This one might seem counterintuitive, that you can actually get quite a long way with a very basic styling available to you. So this is actually the program for Phoenix Design Week. And so let's zoom in here. And now this one's very complicated. There's a lot going on. But let's say that I wanted to highlight my name, and the only thing I wanted to do was change it to light italic. So everything else is the same. It's going to be in the same like casing. It's going to be the same indent. It's going to be everything. I can have a character style, and it says style light italic, and just tap it once. Boom, that's it. Right? Here's another one where this one is light italic, and I want to shift it to like small caps, open type small caps. This one doesn't have it. Does it have the fake small caps? Yes, it does. There's another one for the underline, no underline, condensed medium italic. Okay, cool. So all I'm doing is changing essentially the font, but it could be something else. It could be like color. Like I actually made that one there on the side. So let's do it right now. Okay, here's a good example. So right now it's set to this dark color, but if I wanted to set it as the paper, I can make like just part of it, as color equals paper. And then you can see I just shift that. So that would be useful if I was doing like a, punctuation as decoration kind of thing. And, you wouldn't have it in the middle of a word, but maybe something like that. Oh boy. And just go back, and then I can undo, and it remembers the rest of the style. That type of thing. So if having a single use character style is actually very helpful. And part of the reason it's helpful too is that you can actually use multiple styles once you get into grep and nested styles as well. So you can have multiple characters as long as they don't interfere with each other, right? Yeah, I'm going a little fast here. So make one for bold, italic, baseline shift, the simple transformations that sometimes happen again and again. It's really helpful if you have them there ready to go. That's an example. That's a really low-res image, but we were just there in InDesign, right? Color, style, weight. Like I said, baseline shift again. You can have those ready to go, and you can almost build those in by default, no matter what typeface you're using, because it's only examining, in this case, the style or the weight. It's not actually examining the font family. Okay, let's keep going. Guides and grids are underrated. Now, please believe me, I have seen too many files that have no guides, no grids, no margins even. They're just sort of naked to the world. It's just a white page, and everything's just kind of floating there. And I guess people lined it up with like little spacer blocks or something. It's wild to me because InDesign has so many powerful guides and grids features available. Let's jump in right to the best practices. Change the look of your guides. So actually, maybe this is like a pro tip, but I don't know if you know this. You can change the look of your guides. So you can come in and say, hey, wait a minute. I want my guides to be red. I want them to be green, not just this like bright cyan color. So you can actually change that up. So let's go to this document. You can see it's kind of a folding mailer that has a postage address and everything. So I could zoom in here. Right now, you can see the guide is it's on the green layer, the guides layer, but then it is actually like maroon. And you say, well, that's interesting. How'd you get that? Let me show you. It's right here in a very underrated feature, which is that if you highlight it, and to do that, of course, you have to unlock it. So the layer has to be unlocked, and then you have to unlock the guides, which is, let's see, view, guides and grids, and make sure this is unlocked. So right now it is unlocked. I'm not going to click it. Select your guide and then go to, let's see, layout, ruler guides. So this like regular guide is called a ruler guide. And if you select this option, you get this tiny pop-up window that says view threshold. So that's basically at what zoom level do you start to see it? And you could change that. So for example, if you're zoomed out, and you want the document to look less cluttered when you zoom out, you can change it to a higher one, like 50%. But if you're, by default, it's sort of 5%. But more importantly, you could leave the default if you don't know what I'm talking about. But then the default, or the important bit, is the color. So I could change this from brick red to, let's say something very overt, grid blue. Okay, and then when I deselect it, you can see now it's blue. It's no longer that red color. So I'll do it again. Ruler guides, I changed it to like obnoxious yellow, and then bam, there's the yellow one. So it works well on the pasteboard, doesn't work too well on the actual field here. The other thing you can do with guides, so here's another one that's kind of a default color, that bright cyan. You can actually make it dash. So you see this right here? That's a dash. How'd I get that to represent the fold line? Well, that's something called liquid guides. And this was a feature in InDesign that it was popular. I mean, it was introduced a couple versions ago. I want to say it was like 2015. So whatever that was, CS4, I don't know. Liquid guides were intended to help with liquid layouts, which is a way to quickly scale the entire proportions of a whole layout. So for example, if you're doing a magazine ad and you're doing it in like 6 different magazines and they all have slightly different dimensions. You can create a liquid layout so that the logo is always in the right space and the headline is always lined up with the paragraph text or whatever it is, even though the entire document is shifting. And if you've ever worked in social media, you can imagine how that would be helpful. Liquid layouts are sort of gone, but liquid guides persist. And this one is actually easier to access. You just would never know. You highlight it, you see the cursor changes, and you right click, and then where it says guide type, choose liquid guide. And then boom, it goes to dash. And again, you can't really see this, so I'll make it a better color. Dark blue, sure. And then you can see now it's dashed line. So you can change the look of the guide and the color of the guide. Which are pretty underrated. I mean, what would be really underrated is if those two options were right here in the control panel where there's basically nothing except the location. I mean, now I'm asking for the world here, but let's keep going. So change the look of guides. Now, pro tip, and I got this one from Armin Witt from Under Consideration from the brand new conference, to use a 3-point baseline grid. Now, why 3? Well, it gives you a lot of options. First, let me show you how to set it up. So if you go to your preferences panel, slide down to grids on the left side, and then from the start, make it 0. That's the top of the page. And then increment every. By default, it's going to be something like 12. Maybe your company uses 10, or in publishing, I've seen some weird ones, or 9.27. Like whatever your baseline grid is, change it to 3 point. And the result of that is that you have just a crap ton of baselines to choose from. And so you can choose type that is any multiple of 3. So you can have, your fine print is 6, your body text is 9, your subheads are 12, your main headlines are 15 or 18. You see what I'm saying? That everything is a multiple of 3, 24, 48, 72. And it makes the math really easy. It creates a kind of harmony just with mathematics, but also the spacing. So you can see right in this image, like, that gap between the blue and the gray is 3 points. And the size here is what is that, 12 points? I can't tell off the top of my head, but the space between lines, the leading is going to be 6 point, and the space between items here is 12. I actually have this one open. Let's go to it. So you can see that from a distance it looks fine, but once you get in there, you see that everything is kind of a multiple of that 3-point grid. And if you don't believe me, we can make just like a little rectangle and say, hey, what's the gutter there? Yeah, it's 12 point. I'm sorry. Oh, I should have just counted because it's a square. There we go. Yeah, so you can see it's a square. So 12-point margins, 3-point gap here. This type is honestly probably 10.5 because I sometimes split the difference. But that is the idea of the 3-point grid. And so you have a lot of things. What's the type here? 18 on 27. Those are both multiples of 3. So that fits nicely. Same thing with the headline and everything. 3-point grid is a short way to just get everything lined up and beautiful. Depending on the typeface, you might have to cheat with the body text, but we'll come back to that. Give it a try. 3-point grid. Okay, reality number 5. InDesign is smarter than you. You have to feed it data. What? Yeah, there are actually some features in InDesign that require you to like build your files well, to use super files. And when you do, you're populating the file, you're populating the software with data, and then you can ask for that data back. And that's like super cool. So you have to use styles for everything though. Paragraph styles, even if you have something that only appears once, you have to give it a style so that can be associated and you can have that piece of data attached to whatever text it is. Like say it's the cover of a book. You might only have one cover, but if you give it a style, now you have the option to call upon it and say, hey, what was the cover title? What is the name of this book again? And you can drop that in somewhere else without typing it. You can use the mathematics. So this comes into a demonstration most prevalently with the table of contents. And that is, as I say, an actual InDesign thing. So rather than, well, we've all seen a table of contents, rather than typing this craziness with all the indents and all the changes to the names, like you can imagine if this was like a huge book or if this was a government document and it was 500 pages and you have all these subheads and all these paragraphs and whatever, and somebody goes and reorders them or actually rewrites purpose of functional specific document. Imagine if you just change the title of that. Now every time you have to update the table of contents. Oh my god, what a mess. So there's a better way to do it in InDesign, but first you have to make sure that you have your page numbers and sectioning set up. And I didn't even do that in this talk, but look it up. Look up sectioning, folks. Paragraph styles have to be there for your main like page titles, your sections, your subsections, and then you have to create table of content styles, which are different from your regular paragraph styles. So remember that flow chart where it's like object, paragraph styles, character styles? The table of content styles are paragraph styles. Let me show you an example. I'm going to go to the program again for the Phoenix Design Week. I actually made, I don't know if you can see that on the right side, paragraph styles. So I have these like folders, these groups of styles, titles and interstitials, but then I have table of contents and schedule. So I made TOC section names, TOC subsection names. And so those are going to help me create the look and the structure of the table of contents. And here it is. So let's do it. Is that what's coming up to do an example? Okay, one more thing. The whole premise of the table of contents is this, with the logic that I've laid out here. Search the document for a specific paragraph style, whatever you're looking for. It could be page header, could be chapter title, things like that. All right. Maybe you just call it like H1, like you're one of these web people. Search for a specific style. And when you find it, include it in the table of contents and also apply some of these, what we call TOC styles. So that's where you'd say, hey, I'm going to include it at the top level here. And then I'm going to give it this look, this black, uppercase, whatever font that is, whatever type size that is. So that's what we're doing here. Now, let me show you how that works. Table of contents in the program guide. Now, I've done this already, so I'll just kind of move this over to the side. Oh, hey, what are you doing here? Let's just delete that. Okay, so you have an empty text frame, and I want to generate the table of contents. So, believe it or not, just have it selected, and then go to Layout, Table of Contents. And it'll give me a window with all these options. Now, I already configured it, so you can basically see what's happening. It's looking through the document for all of this stuff. And then once you get it, you can add it, and you can give it a table of content style. And then you also have these options here that when you create a PDF, an interactive PDF, you can have them as clickable bookmarks, which is very cool. This thing is not the greatest interface, but the point is that when basically I'm going to show you, when you click OK, it's going to just like automatically generate this thing rather than having to type it. Wow, look at that. So it knows that this is a page header. It knows, well, it's sort of giving itself a reference. That's not good. But then you have all the pages, and you have the page numbers, and then you have the subheads. And so there's definitely going to be some editing involved. So for example, this page is called the Creative Oasis. That's on page 4. I don't really need the subhead of that page, so I can delete that. Same thing with the design tips. I don't need that. But then something like day 1, I might want the event schedule, but I'll just call that like the same thing. Does that make sense? Day 1 on page 6. This type of thing. So there is definitely going to be some editing involved. But now, I didn't know that this is on page 17. I would have to look it up. But instead, I let the data do the work for me. I let InDesign generate it for me. And then I can come back and modify it. And if you have to update it, you can just go the same thing. Layout, update table of contents, and it will regenerate itself in place. And yes, you would have to do the changes again. So maybe just tweak your settings rather than modify them 50 times. If you didn't know it was there, now you know. Okay, here's another one. Explore text variables. So I'm going to go back to the slug that I made. You can see it on the right side here. Now, here's the cool thing. Anytime you see this very lightweight boundary around the type, that's how you know I'm using a text variable. So date created, that's a text variable. I didn't have to memorize that it was created on September 7th. It just knows. Last saved, well, obviously InDesign knows when it was the last saved because that's like a very computery type of thing. And right now it's not saved. I'm actually going to click Command S. Give it a second. It's going to save. Oh boy. Okay. And now when I go out of preview mode and go back again, this just updated. Now it's the 18th of October. So you can see it's live updating. That's a simple use for a variable. Another variable is the page number. This is like one of the most prototypical page variables or text variables, but I can also do, like, let's say I didn't want the page number to just be like the page. I want it to be out of, and then I want the last page number. That one is also available. It's very common. If I go to type, and then I go to text variables, I can insert, and then let's see, last page number. It's there by default. And I can add that, and then boom. This is, well, page 1. That's not telling me anything. But then if I, I'm only in the master page here. And if I drop into one of these other ones, you can see it says 108. So it put the 108 in there because that's the last page number. And if I add to this whole document, okay, so you can see I added a page and now there's 109 at the final page. And that only goes to the section. So you would have to add a page to the section. Yeah, now it says 110 because I added a page. You see that? So it's a variable that updates live, and that's pretty cool. This time I'm going to close and I'm not going to save because I did some crazy stuff to it. Text variables, definitely worth exploring. They are right there in the text menu, like I said. Another cool example could be, let's say you're doing a same publication seasonally. You could have a variable that says season, and then when you start a new one, you just change the variable. You say, okay, it's no longer winter, it's now spring. And every mention of the word winter in the entire document gets updated. And let me tell you, that's a lot more reliable than find change, because we are fallible. We rewrite different things. But if there's a computer helping you, if you actually put the software to work, it won't mess up for something like that, right? Accessibility matters. That's reality number 6. This is a new one. This is kind of a new frontier for a lot of us, because if we're working in print, we don't really have the same concept of accessibility that we do on the web. But as more and more documents go electronic for EPUB, for PDF, and even for websites, it's something we have to consider in InDesign. And mainly I'm talking about export tagging in PDFs. Export tagging, you'd be like, what the heck is that? It's right there. So there's this option in the paragraph styles at the bottom of the list called export tagging. And this creates a HTML style class that governs every piece of text in your document. So every style, I remember I said everything should be a style, even the front cover of the book. Everything has to have a paragraph style, and everything has to have a tag as well. So that way you can use a reader, a screen reader, a PDF, some other type of software that can scan those tags, and it can understand the structure of the document. This is one of those things, it's like a whole world unto itself. But once you start researching it, you understand how cool it is. Right, here's another, just a more advanced view. HTML styles and tags in the top. Then you have CSS. It just reads it out to you in a different syntax. So you could actually copy that and send it to one of your developers and say, hey, the top of the website is supposed to look like this. That type of thing. And then for the PDF, it's similar. It's more concerned with the headings, as you can see, but it does have paragraph and artifact, which is like punctuation and other weird stuff. And then the character styles has their own version of it too. So you get strong, you get emphasis, right, for italic and bold. There's a few other options. Definitely worth exploring. And I think I should sort of go off script and show you like what the heck the tags are. The trouble is I want to get like a better document that actually has them. Oh boy, no, I think I'll show you in this document. Now this is a slideshow, so I gotta be honest, I don't know what's gonna happen, but let's open this thing, and you can see that the tags is like similar to the pages, bookmarks. You might have to find it. You might have to search the tools and but if you click it, you see this crazy sort of hierarchy, and it shows you on every page what is like available to you. So if we go to the next or the previous page, and then you open that up and you see like how many, oh, that's the first page, how many different things are broken down into individual pieces. So unlike InDesign, Acrobat destroys your your story and doesn't flow things together. Instead, it breaks everything down into individual sections, and then those get broken down into paragraphs and everything. So that's another curious one. My gosh, where was I? 55? All right, here's a pro tip. Alternate the case and all caps for headers. Hard to explain, but this is basically what I'm talking about. That for accessibility, it is actually helpful that as you create a hierarchy of titles and subheadings, you alternate between normal case or title case and an all caps or even a small caps. So that way, at a glance, the reader knows that they're changing level. So the type is getting smaller. We're also varying the weight, and then we're also varying that case as well. And it's a very like subliminal thing almost, that if you have two typefaces or two headings that are the same size, but one of them is capitals and one of them is title case, it looks automatically like there's a relationship there, and the one that is more prominent would be the all caps one. So if in this case, you see it kind of quickly goes from 1 to 5, but if you don't have that amount of range, then you can just shift just the casing, and it makes it easier to read. So all of this is about making it intuitive for the user to read. They don't have to think too much about, oh, am I in a new subhead? Like, that type of thing. So just this quick tip, you give it a try here. But let's keep moving here. Reality number 7. Remember, there's 9. InDesign is extendable through plugins, etc. Now, this is weird. I admit that you would say, okay, well, what's a plugin? What's a extension? What's a add-on? What's a script? Like we're all talking about the same thing, which is adding more functionality to InDesign than is there like right out of the box. And so one way to do that is with the plugins, and I'll show you that real quick. So the funny thing is that there is in recent versions of InDesign, they actually added a plugins menu. Can you see that? Plugins panel, browse, and manage. And I don't think this is implemented very well, but if you go to the plugins panel, it comes up and there's like nothing here. And you're like, what the hell's going on here? And again, this is not a very great experience. You click discover, it brings up the Creative Cloud app, and then you're sort of you're brought to this was essentially a store. Some of these are paid, some of them are free, a lot of them are free, but you're just like, whatever, man. So I can understand why people don't really use plugins that well. But let me show you some of the scripts that are cool that I have installed, and just open your eyes to this entire world. So for example, I have like 3 documents open right now. Have you ever had the situation where you make changes on the same document? You say, oh God, I got to update the address. I got to remove the Cleveland office from all 3 documents. We no longer do business in Cleveland. Then you got to make PDFs of everything. And there could be like 15 different documents all at once. We did this last year, dozens. And wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to go to export menu every time and do like an individual PDF? You just export everything at once. Well, there's a script for that. I'm going to open my scripts menu, user, batch convert. And I have a link to this in the companion page. If you double click this, you'll get this window, and then it gives you the option on batch processing. So in this case, I'm going to make a PDF. Instead of EPS or HTML, I can just use PDF. Smallest file size, so it has access to my settings, my presets rather. Desktop is fine. All this is fine. I'm going to hit OK, and then it's just going to grind for a bit. And then look, I've got new PDFs. In this case, it opened them automatically. So and it saved them to the desktop as well. So I've got new PDFs of everything that we were just working on that is open concurrently. That's a cool feature. It should be built right into InDesign, but it's not. But it's expandable. Let me show you another one real quick. And that is, I actually installed this, and it makes its own menu item. So this is called Analyze Document, and this one is not, like, how can we say this? I've already installed it, which is why it's in the menu here. So if you don't see File, Analyze Document, that's why. Keith Gilbert made this one. I think when you load it up, you get a splash screen, and I have the link again. And you hit OK, and look what comes up. Information about my document. This is super useful. It's similar to when you do the pre-flight or the export, but you have just some quick notes, 2 nested styles. That's interesting. 3 text variables. Remember, I was just talking about those. Pasted graphics, Word documents, Excel. It gives you a lot of information here about everything that's cooking. Now, this is just a simple like text document, just for demonstrating. But let's go to one that's maybe a little more complicated like this. It's got images and stuff. There's only 2 pages. Analyze document. Yep, thank you. And then here we go. It's got information about hidden items. It's got colors, hyperlinks, lots of stuff happening. Still not very complicated, actually. That's a cool feature because if you're ever working with some partners, we're working with another firm, you can package up the document, you can include that text. It's more human readable, and someone could say, oh, yeah, I see what's happening here. It's great to work with printers as well. So that's a cool one. I encourage you to look around for plugins and scripts and find out which ones are beneficial for your workflow. Absolutely. That is something a lot of people don't know exists in InDesign, the ability to add more functionality. Explore the plugins panel, like I was saying. Learn to manually add extensions. Most extensions or plugins will have some kind of tutorial on how to install them, but it's a little weird. You have to go inside the installation of your computer and mess around with some of the text files that maybe you haven't seen before. So just get used to that and you'll be fine. Okay, let's go. Reality number 8. InDesign has built-in sharing and review. Did you know this? I think you did. Maybe. Some of you did. So if I want to share this document, you're thinking, all right, I got to make a PDF. Then I have to upload the PDF. Then I have to send someone a link. And then I got to email them. And when they're gonna open it, they're going to email back. And they're just going to type a bunch of stuff. Like, that's insane. What you can do is just go to File. And then there's two options. One is Share for Review. What? It's right there. You get this little window. And then you can just create the link. And it's going to upload essentially a PDF of this document. I'll copy that, and then I'll flip over to a browser, and then just like open up a new window here. And with that same link, it's just going to show me. It's cool. You're getting a live demonstration here. It's going to show me that document on the web, so I can go page 1, and then here's page 2. Oh, that's awesome. And if I wanted to, I could make a comment. You have this whole like commenting system here. You can circle something and then say, what's going on? And then submit that, and it'll put my name and date and everything. And someone else can come in and say, it's cool. And, this is the type of thing you've seen before. It's actually very helpful for a simple document like a flyer, which is this, a 2-sided flyer. I think most people can understand that this is the front and then the other side is the back. Got it. What happens if you want to do something more? I'm going to close this for a second. What happens if you want to do something more complicated like that program? Let's see. Yeah, the program concept. You don't need to update that. Like, let me tell you, InDesign is sometimes really annoying, right? If you have a document like this, 100+ pages, and it's set up as spreads, you're going to see a little bit of the drawback, which is actually, let me go dig up the file real quick. Okay, so here's the program on the web, and you can see the reason it looks sort of okay is because I got ahead of myself and I installed the pro tip here, which is that it's different than InDesign because I added this page fold example. So I made a layer and I called it page fold effect. And so it's basically just a little gradient. Can you see that in the middle there? And it just creates the effect or the look of having an actual like folded document. So if I go back to the web, you could see without the guides and everything, it creates the appearance of a gutter down the middle. And that's helpful because you sort of have to know the limitation of this share for review feature, that it puts everything as spreads. It doesn't give you the option to create individual pages. So everything would just be this wide format, and someone who doesn't really understand publication design might not understand that you're looking at 2 pages, not 1. So, and the other thing is, so this is the cover page, which is by itself. But then this is the real cover page that you could see an earlier concept, by the way. I had to make this like placeholder page so that you see there's nothing opposite of it. You're just looking at the cover of the passport here. And so I made this as like a placeholder page, and knowing that I can't separate these as spreads. So you have to know the limitations of the share for review feature. One good thing about the share for review feature is that, where did I go here? I'm going to bring this back. There's actually a review window. So if you go to comments, review, you can open up this review window, and it actually brings in the comments from the web. Remember, I just typed that. What's going on? It's cool. Like, it actually brings that up, and it will, I think if you click on it, it'll sort of highlight approximately where it is. And so you can add comments right here in the document. And that's a pretty cool feature too, that you can update the page and you don't have to update the link. It would just override the same link. So that's definitely a strength of this tool here. The only trick is that if you reorder your document, like if I don't know, let's say this was 6 pages and I changed the order of the pages, it would still say, spread number 3, even though spread number 3 is now different content. So, it's almost done. The main trouble with share for review is that it's just not finished. It is very immature from a Adobe point of view. But let me show you the other one. If you go to File, remember I said there's 2 ways. File, not share for a review, but right below it, Publish Online. And I swear it's been there for multiple versions. It's pretty cool. If you click this, you get this interactive sort of feature coming up. Give it a second here. And I'm not going to give it a name for now, but here you can choose if you want it single or if you want it spreads. And then you also have some advanced options. It looks very similar to a PDF. And if I hit publish, let's see if it just brings me there automatically. Copy link, close. Let's pop over to the web. And you actually get a pretty nice web experience here where it's a full screen and then I can go to the next page. And again, this is only a flyer, so it's pretty straightforward. And then I have the options. I can download the file. Where is that? Volume? I don't know. There's other options. I can share it. I can go full screen. I guess I didn't check the option to download it, but there is an option to download this as a PDF from this viewing experience. And so again, use the companion website link. I actually put the slideshow for this presentation in both formats, as you can see how they work. Yeah, this is what I was just talking about. Publish online, cool. And then you can do something like that. Share for review. Yep. There you go. Okay. I talked about that. Placeholder page and shadow effect. I talked about that as well. So let me just quickly run it back for you. Where is it? No. Okay. That's the page fold effect. And I basically just went all the way to the master page, which has, it's hidden or it's locked. And it's just a box with a gradient, So what's my gradient here? It's just from gray to white. Set it to multiply, didn't I? Where is it? Yeah, multiply 22%. So it's barely anything, but it creates the illusion of having that page fold. And then the placeholder page, I think I made a master of that as well. Placeholder, yeah. And I mimicked the transparent background in Photoshop, and I just put this fake sticky note. So it says this page does not exist. Of course it exists. It's like real objects. It's just a bunch of squares that are grouped together. But again, knowing how it's going to display, it sort of fools the mind to think that there's nothing. It fools designers anyway. Not that serious. Okay, let's keep going. I already covered that. AI is coming. Last one. Now, let's talk about AI in InDesign very briefly. In 2024, these are beta features. In 2025, they are in the main install of InDesign, the main version. And essentially, it's a very light touch. So, right, here's our generated InDesign special forces, right? I don't know what I was just playing with, but the superheroes, and they have these guys for backup, maybe. You can generate images and place them in InDesign without leaving InDesign. So all that generative imagery and the photography, the retouching, all that stuff that's mainly coming from Photoshop and from that world, it is available in InDesign without leaving. That's pretty cool. Let me show you. Yeah. So let's go to InDesign. We'll make a new document here. I don't like facing pages. So, okay, new document. Great. Put in a frame, something like this. And I'm not naming my layers or anything. I'm just rushing. And I can use the text to image. And again, in 2024, it's beta. In 2025, it's the real thing. And if I click this, and by the way, if this is not open for you, I think it's called the contextual taskbar. So if it's closed, go to Window, contextual taskbar. I can't even say that. Text to image beta. Describe the image. I will say mountain with trees, wide view, sunset. I don't even know. I'm just going to generate it. Let's see what happens here. Okay, that works. Do we have any options, or we just have the one, I wonder? 1 of 3. That's another example. That's cool. and that's cool. Very focusing on the sun. I like number 2. Let's close this thing for a second. So I'll take this and I'll make it, wider, and I'll pull it to the edge here and just scale it up and make sure, yeah, it's scaled in proportion. Okay, so that's my background here. I just, and it's the same type of thing. Like if I want it to be a background that I know is going to be used for something later, I might sample this color. You're watching me live design, which is kind of crazy. Like I'll just sample one of these colors here. Got it. And then change the image opacity to, I don't know. Okay, so now it's it's a background. I'm getting ready to write something on top of it. And then you get a call. Hey, this is going to print. Okay. Well, now it's going to print, but it's not just going to go on the office sort of Xerox machine. It's actually going to go to press. So now we don't need such big margins. We can actually do bleeds. So we can say document setup, and then we can add like an 1/8 of an inch of bleed all around. And you say, cool, got it. But then hold on, this image came from, live generation. So how the heck am I supposed to extend it beyond the page here? So if I open up the frame, well, in this case, it actually has some extra. Give me a second. Let's say, okay, there you go. That's a more realistic thing. It's just the sky. You say, wait a minute, how am I supposed to fill this area? You got to spend all day like painting it or just enlarging it. But actually, InDesign has that capability now. So I can use what they call generative expand, and it will enlarge the area of my image. And I don't need a prompt here. I can just hit OK, and hopefully it should take that image and expand it into the bleeds. That's a very common workflow if you work in print, where someone sends you a file that is not extended into the bleed area, and the image itself is not large enough to cover the bleed area. But now we have the ability to do that with AI, and that worked really nicely. So that's a cool little AI feature. And this image, no, it's generated behind the scenes with Adobe Firefly probably, and you can actually get it. So it's hiding in the links panel, and you can see it's like embedded. It doesn't have a link. It doesn't have a file extension or a file path to a location on my computer. So you're like, well, where is this file? Well, it's embedded in InDesign, and you can, if you want to save it, you can right click and actually, I'm sorry, it's on the web. So it's like, that's even worse. By default, it's not embedded. So I first have to embed it. Now it's no longer in some weird nebulous place on the web. Now it's embedded in the file. Got it. Cool. But now if I want to edit it, if I want to save it, I have to unembed the link, and I get a prompt for a link to the original. Do you want a link to the original file? No. And then I get a prompt. So now I can say I'll save it on the desktop. Cool. And it'll just give me, what did it call it? Gen II image 6.jpg. So now it's linked in the traditional way to that location on the desktop. Got it. So if you and you can modify from there, you can bring it into Photoshop, but the point of it is that I generated an image, it was too small, I extended it using the AI tools. Now, what would be nice is if it had some AI tools that actually helped you do your layout, like if it had better hyphenation controls and sort of had something to cure the widows and orphans, or if it could suggest type pairs, right? You have a headline font, it should know what kind of body text is good, or if it just created like paragraph styles based on your visual preferences. So you could say, hey, this is going to like 9th graders, and be like, okay, they probably have good vision, so we can scale it down to 10 point, as opposed to if it was 65-year-old people that you say, let's scale up the text a little bit, let's use this higher contrast, etc. Like that, those would be real artificial intelligence that could help you in the design process. For now, it's a lot of image generation that came from Photoshop. So just be on the lookout, and frankly, give it a try. Like, let's see how it goes. But if you're asking me, I think that the better way is still to use the native tool, use Photoshop or Illustrator or just Firefly, whatever, and then grab those assets, save them, import them in the usual way. Because also when you do that, you can update the metadata, and you can use live captions, for example. So the old way is still the way for the time being. Okay, but really, that's it. Man, I went through that quickly, but also clumsily, I admit. But don't forget the realities that we learned today. InDesign relies on printing terminology. No one explains the hierarchy of type. I just did. Hopefully you'll remember that. Paragraph styles are more than just style. They are structure as well. And they're data, which is cool. Guides and grids are underrated. You can totally kick up a notch by using some of the guides. InDesign is smarter than you, but only if you use the variables, use the table of contents. Accessibility, start doing that, man. Start doing the export tagging as you build your documents. So much easier than doing it after the fact. InDesign is extendable through plugins, and it has sharing and review built in. So there's probably a better sharing and review plugin. I mean, PageProof, which is like a whole standalone product, but there's probably a plugin. Check it out and then watch for AI, see what they're doing. I mean, aside from image generation, there's probably some cool stuff coming. All right. So I'll leave you there. That's obviously the website that you're sort of looking at right now. Thanks for your patience. And I hope you really enjoyed this, and definitely get in touch if you need any help with InDesign. All right. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next conference or wherever. Take care.